Roads looked more like rivers after nearly 10 inches of rain fell on Leominster last night, prompting the state to declare a public emergency and the town to cancel school as flash floods washed out roads, inundated buildings, and forced hundreds to evacuate. It's one of the worst storms the area has seen in a while, but it's also part of a growing trend of more frequent and more severe rainstorms hitting the Northeast year after year. Weather and climate scientists say climate change is to blame. One of them, GBH News meteorologist Dave Epstein, joins me now. He's also been keeping an eye on Hurricane Lee as it makes its way up the East Coast. Dave, thanks so much for joining me today. So just to start off, can you give us a lay of the land of what exactly happened over the last few days? How are these towns managing with all the flooding?
Yeah, certainly a lot of rain. Good to be here with you. And what we had was a little boundary in the atmosphere, and that boundary basically got stuck over northern Worcester County into northern Middlesex County, and that provided the rainfall impetus to continue that rain for a long stretch of time. We call it, in some parlance, training, which means that the rain kind of goes almost like it's on train tracks. It keeps reappearing in the same area over and over and over again. Very unusual to have, of course, this much rain without a tropical system. Indeed, probably a once-in-200-year odds kind of event. Doesn't mean that these events will occur every 200 years. It just means the odds of these occurring is something like once every couple of hundred years.
I mean, we're talking here about some, several inches of rain over the span of very few hours. Can you give us just a sense of how much rain they dealt with?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, over 9 inches of rain in the Leominster area, close to 10. There's probably some places that did get 10. There's not rain gauges in every spot. And then many other areas, anywhere from 2 to as much as 6 inches of rain in a fairly widespread area across northern sections of Worcester County, Middlesex County, and even parts of Essex County. That's a huge volume of water. Our infrastructure isn't built to kind of handle that. People's basements is not built to handle that. And therefore, we end up with the flooding that we've seen over the past day.
And obviously, climate change over the past few years, has been said to be partly to blame for this rise in these kinds of tropical storms that we see. To what degree do you think climate change is playing into these storms, and should we expect more of this kind of rainfall in the years to come?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind what climate change does to weather. Climate change is what's happening over long periods of time. Decades, even centuries, right? So we are warming up here across the planet. The Northeast is forecast to have more heavy rain events in the United States than any other area. So our heavy rain events are forecast to go up percentage-wise more than any other area. Would this heavy rain event last night have happened if climate change weren't happening? If all else equal, probably, but it might not have been as powerful. And so the frequency of these events and the intensity of the events when they happen is more likely being exacerbated by climate change. So certain things are going to happen anyway. It's weather. We have events like this. But as the climate warms, it makes these events bigger, more powerful, and more frequent. And that's how the climate impacts the weather we're observing.
So obviously you can't prepare for everything, and sometimes, municipalities have to deal with torrential rain that they don't anticipate. This is a region that doesn't necessarily deal with the kind of rainfall we see in Florida or the kind of rainfall that we saw the other day. But, how prepared is the state and the region for an increase in this kind of in these kinds of weather events?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that a lot of municipalities are preparing for more water, right? If it's along the coastline, we know that sea levels are rising. If it's inland areas, we have to be prepared for these events, which will become more frequent. But a lot of our infrastructure was built long before climate change, in some cases, really got underway. And so some of this is just not ready for it and will never be ready until it's replaced or upgraded. And that's the challenge for all the cities and towns across not only Massachusetts, but frankly, the entire world. There's been incredible amounts of flooding in other parts of the world this summer. I mean, just in Libya over the past couple of days, an incredible flooding situation, which unfortunately took the lives of thousands of people.
And so what should residents expect from the state, from the federal government when it comes to aid and helping them out? What should residents expect in the coming days and weeks?
Yeah, so in terms of aid and financial aid and all of that from the federal government, I'd say, look to your local municipalities, check with wherever you check to find that sort of thing. As a meteorologist, I'm concerned with forecasting that stuff, and the impact of it, that's going to have to be on the individual homeowner.
So residents are also preparing for this weekend or later this week, this upcoming storm from Hurricane Lee. What should people expect this weekend? And given the amount of flooding that happened, are the towns prepared for even more rainfall later this week?
Yeah, so right now Hurricane Lee looks like it's going to take a track just around Bermuda. It'll be to the left of Bermuda. It will not hit them. And then it's going to move off towards the north. You can see on this map here, this shows where tropical storm force winds, so winds over 39 miles an hour or higher, are forecast to occur. Notice that the heaviest odds or the highest odds are way out in the Atlantic, well east of New England. So in terms of wind, I'm not really concerned at all. The rain envelope from the system will probably nick eastern Massachusetts and certainly could end up hitting Maine. It depends on how close the storm comes to the United States as to whether or not we get into the swath of the heavy rain or whether or not we just have some showers. Either way, it's a fast-moving storm. I don't expect to see a ton of rain here unless the track dramatically changes over the next couple of days. So Saturday will be a breezy day. There'll probably be showers, especially from Boston east and northeast, but this will not, the way it looks now, turn into a major situation.
Are officials giving any guidance to residents as to how to prepare for that storm and or how to deal with what's going on now? What kind of guidance are residents getting from the state?
Yeah, so other than Lee, we actually have another rain event coming in for Wednesday when we're already under a flood watch for much of the state, including Greater Boston, including Leominster. So there will be some more showers developing during Wednesday, lasting into Thursday morning. That's not associated with Hurricane Lee. And then I would just say this to folks. Again, I don't expect Lee to be a problem around here. Just stay tuned to latest forecasts. If you have a coastal interest, perhaps a boat or a home or something like that, just listen to the forecast. If the track starts to trend off towards the left, in other words, we're going to get hit a little bit harder, that's the time to prepare. But at this point, I'd say there's really nothing residents should be doing because it just doesn't look like it's going to be a big deal around here from Lee as of now.
I think that's a good note to end on. Dave Epstein, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.